All right. Hi, Ravi. We are officially live. I am excited. Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are continuing our countdown to the 19th Annual Church Law and Leadership Summit. And today I am excited to introduce another one of our incredible speakers, Ravi Waldon. We have had this opportunity to go live and give you all a glimpse of several of our speakers, and today is another wonderful opportunity. So, as a principal of Michael Graves Architecture, Ravi brings a really unique perspective to the summit. He has led more than 300 church facility projects across the country, helping ministries think through everything from construction and renovations to long term campus planning. So when we talk about building resilient churches, we can't leave the church property conversation out of it, right? Our buildings are not just places where ministry happened. They're really significant financial investments, and when stewarded well, they can become a powerful tool for advancing the mission of the church. You know that this year, for the first year, we are having a 2-day summit. People have asked for this from the very beginning, and I'm excited that we're going to be able to provide it to you this year. So Ravi's joining us on day 2. He's going to be a part of that fireside chat that you all love, and we're going to be talking about church property, where we're going to discuss some real decisions that church leaders are facing when it comes to their facilities. So the team has already dropped, I believe, the registration link in the comments below, so you can take a look at all the amazing speakers we have, or go to eureka.com/summit 2026. So Ravi, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to give everyone a little preview of the conversation we'll be having with you at the summit.
Thank you for having me today, Eureka. It's just really great to join you.
You're so welcome. Ravi, I have known you for, I don't know exactly how many years, but I'm going to say over a decade at this point. It's been a while. It's been a while, and I have always appreciated your vantage point when it comes to these important discussions about church property. So let's just start with the big picture. When you work with a church that's thinking about its property, what does good stewardship of a church facility actually look like from your perspective as someone who works in the field of helping churches with their property matters?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so great to be with you. And designing churches is my passion and my calling. And I think your question can be answered in two different directions. One is about new construction, and one is about existing and what to do. And I'm just going to try to answer it at a high level, and just things that are always needed. And, the idea of good stewardship has to start with prayer. And I'm an architect, so I'm a data-driven guy too, and that's important. So have you been praying about it? Is God leading the church in this direction? It's very critical. And I've come to see the value of that in all of our projects. But have you also been tracking the data, both internal and external data? It's easy to get, and you need to pay attention to it. Who's coming to your church, and where is your ministry growing? And then there's lots of, you can plug in your zip code and get a lot of data about it. How's the nature of your neighborhood changing? Who's coming? And so I think that's very important. Just in terms of good stewardship, I've been in situations where, a pastoral, he's got a church of 80, but now he wants me to design a church for 800. And, I never discount faith, what God can do, but I've always only ever seen him work in the ministry through the people of the church. And most often it's methodical and requires planning. Secondly, beyond prayer data answer, there's also the vision question. And does the church, has it answered the big picture questions about your vision and ministry philosophy? You don't have to have every little jot and tittle figured out, but you should answer big questions like, are we going to be growing here? Or are we going to go multi-site and things like that? So that drives the philosophy of what architects, we like to design. We'll design anything, but if we're designing the wrong thing, that doesn't match your philosophy, we're not going to have a good solution for you.
Yeah.
Beyond all that, I'm like consistent with the answer. You'll get it from me a bunch of ways, but planning well ahead. Most times we are brought in and all of a sudden there's a fire lit under the committee and the pastor and they need something like really fast, but not realizing that, in especially our region, it takes a long time. I tell people from the day they bring us in to the day they might move in, it's not less than 3 years. And if it's a virgin piece of land and there's a lot of entitlement to go, it could be twice as long. And then lastly, or another point is just having realistic budgets. I mean, post COVID, I'm even ashamed to like say what prices are because it like blows my mind how much the prices went up post COVID, and they've stayed up, and people kind of discount, oh, the Lord's going to provide. Yes, He provides, but you got to have a sense of what the market is doing because, having not real people often are asking us to do something that is not financially feasible for them, and so that's important to have that. But at one hand, you want to focus on your first cost because you want to get in, but don't forget it costs you a lot more to operate the building over a long period of time. So you got to keep that in mind. And the
Yeah.
last thing I would say, and I know I've been talking a bit, but just having an early master plan and programming to really think ahead about what's the best practices for you, and just to answer your question about good stewardship,
Hmm.
have an early master plan. Do just figure out if we grow, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and have some outline of an answer for those things. And so I would summarize my long answer with just the fact that we want to be faith driven because it's a spiritual work we're doing, but
Hmm.
it's in a balance with planning, and planning and faith are not mutually exclusive. And
Yes.
Bible says any enterprise is built by wise planning. So
I love that so much because we absolutely, first of all, we're people of faith, right? You're a person of faith, you're a believer, I'm a believer, and we have the blessing of being able to serve churches and
amen.
church leaders. And I also am grateful to be a part of that strategy that you're talking about. What makes the most sense, right? Because sometimes churches are considering, we had this discussion earlier this week within our Faithful Foundations membership. We invited an attorney in who works specifically on property matters. And we were saying how it can be exciting, right, for churches to be in a building project or have this vision of something new. That sounds really exciting. And there's also this realistic component that we were talking about counting up the cost, right? Which the Bible also talks about literally in the context of a property, right? It says you want to count up the cost.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people see that you've got this building and it's only a fraction done. You haven't been able to finish it, right? So I
Mhm.
think that goes back to what you say about the master plan. And
Mhm.
we see that post COVID, really the world has changed so much. Hey there, I see someone saying such important takeaways today. Thanks so much. I love the fact that we are looking at things differently because during COVID times, many churches weren't able to meet and we had to really be creative. And then when, here we are 6 years later, I'm seeing that a lot of people haven't returned to church so much. So in
Mhm.
some instances, and then we have some churches that are really booming, right? So there can often be a distinction or a dichotomy even between those two sides. So churches often face these major decisions, right? They're asking, do we renovate what we have? Do we expand? Do we maybe relocate or do we build something new? You kind of touched on some of these things. What are some of the questions that leaders need to be asking themselves before they can make these kinds of important decisions?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm back to the early programming and master planning. When I talk about programming, it's like having the discussion of how many people are we serving, and the architect is skilled in translating that to square footages, and just if we grow based on the strategy, what are the kinds of things that we'll need to do in our building? Can we just reorganize it, or in the next 20 years, is there enough land to grow and expand? And if not, can a new location be found? And, based on what I said a minute ago, it takes a long time to make a change like that and to build something. That's like a decade of planning, really looking ahead, or at least, 6 years. And then you need to think about is if you do move, is it going to decimate your congregation because it's not in the right location? And
Yeah.
there used to be a rule of thumb, and that's the only data I've ever really heard, is if it costs you about 70% of the cost to renovate your building versus building new, then build new. Uh, then if you decide to renovate, though, can you do it and still stay operational? These are all the questions that some of the questions you need to be asking.
No, that's really good. And I think about this in the same context of like your personal home, right? You don't want to be, you hear the term house poor, right? So that really is an indication that so much of your money goes into the facility,
Mm-hmm.
goes into the property, that you really don't have what it takes to live all the rest of life. And that can happen in the church world as well. Churches can have, I have seen 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% of their revenue to debt service and trying to keep really the property going. And I really don't believe that that's what the vision or the heart of that leader was when they were like, let's go. God's calling me to
Mm-hmm.
plant a church, right? So we also see churches that have made a point to go the other direction. They'll say, listen, we're going to really whittle down how much we spend on operations so that we can dedicate 80, 90 plus percent to our outreach, to our mission. So I think really looking at that data and making the important decisions so that um, being fiscally responsible and being good stewards can be at the forefront. And you've seen this, right? Because you've worked on more than 300 church facility projects across the country. I think, in fact, I complimented your back. What is it called? Your not backsplash, but your backdrop. And you
Oh,
mentioned that it's a church actually that you had the chance to work with. So you've worked with over 300 church facility projects across the country. I'm curious if you would share some of the most common mistakes you have seen churches make when planning a church project, and what would you recommend them do differently?
yeah, thank you. Beyond the endless drum of saying plan, plan, plan. I think that it's important to do your homework and get some professional advice early on. Like on many occasions, we walk into a project and the pastor and the committee is, oh, we got such a great deal on this land. But then, I've got at least several examples, where, oh, the church bought land. Oh, but it had terrible soils and it was like built on a rubbish heap. And there was another example of a church that had property and it was bisected by a valley and it just no water and sewer and these things, to get to water and sewer is like a mile to get to public. And these things, it's really hard to explain to your congregation that it's going to cost you million or $2 million on something under the ground that you'll never ever see. And that's a very big complication. So to me, a simple protection is do a thumbnail investigation, with an architect and civil engineer, just to look at it from an extremely high level. Don't try to solve everything. All you want to do is see, is there a showstopper on this property? And for
Mhm.
like 2,500, 3,500 bucks, you can get both of the commentary on that property. And even if you have to search two or three or four properties, that's a whole lot cheaper than buying the wrong property and having to spend a lot more money on infrastructure you wish you didn't have to do. Another point that I would make to answer your question that, oh, and it's kind of a touchy one, but sometimes, oh, I've got a friend and they know construction and they know this or that. But don't jump to that answer. Make sure you have a qualified team because just, and this is not a criticism on any profession. It's just that, just because they're a mechanical contractor or there's something else doesn't mean they've got the whole picture or experience with churches or the big picture of
Hmm.
things. So choose an experienced team, take the moment in time, and maybe
Yes.
that person is the one that is the right person, but
Yes.
don't just
I
jump to
love
that
that.
solution.
Yeah, that's so critical because this is why we put together such an amazing team of speakers and presenters and resources for the Church Lawn Leadership Summit. These are people who serve churches, right? So when we have the discussion about insurance, these are people who specifically serve churches. When we have the architect, they specifically serve churches. When we have the CPA, they specifically serve churches. So this is why the Church Lawn Leadership Summit. We are so grateful that we have hundreds of church leaders already signed on to join us, and we want to invite everyone. If you serve in your church in any capacity, if your church has a vision for expanding, for building a property, or if you think you're at a place where maybe you want to sell your property, or you have church land and you want to explore being able to plant a new church on that property, whatever it is, if it's a church property matter, I'm so excited that this is going to be a topic on this year's Church Lawn Leadership in our fireside chat. Robbie, we appreciate all that you have shared with us so far. I want to ask just a final couple of questions, if I may. We had a webinar yesterday where we talked about church trends. And I loved that we were able to obviously deal with even changes in so many different areas, right? So we've got huge changes in technology, certainly can't leave out AI, changes in how churches operate, HR matters, all these different changes that we hit on. But property is a part of the trending, right? Really related to the shifts that we are seeing. So when we talk about growth and change, what should churches be thinking about today if they want their facilities to remain useful and adaptable 5, 10, or 20 years from now, right? I use the example of being raised in church. There was a steeple church, like that was the way it stained glass. That was really kind of what church looked like 50, 100 years ago. And then we moved to kind of more of a warehouse where there was space for fellowship, but there also, we wanted to make sure that there was lots of space for community activity, things like that. Really, what would you say that churches should be thinking about to be useful and adaptable for the future?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's, I guess the answer is be a student of trends and, keep your eyes and ears open and watch what's happening in society. And you already mentioned, the world is changing from a technological view, but it's also changing in desire for community and just wanting uh, places where you can meet people and build relationships. So both of those aspects have changed church design already. We were talking about my background being it's a chapel, but this is really the addition to the prior project, which was a black box type of worship space. So you can just see the evolution of church design in this one building alone, because there is a trend back toward a more sacred space and more ecclesiastical, and a desire for worship in a more formal setting, but it has like all the audio, video, lighting technology that we would want in modern worship experience. But the screen is behind my head, happens to be in this picture, but um, those are important. And then the other part of that is a change in the way we design lobbies and north axes, and it's not just a place to like leave a building. It's really much bigger square footage is allocated to it because we want people to hang out and to visit and to fellowship, and there'll be soft seating for people to sit down and to just have a chat, and private areas where you can pray and things like that. All of the things that changed in society trickle their way into the design of a church building itself.
Hmm, I love
The
that.
other part of the answer, Erika, is just the technology side. We tend to design in steel, um, and uh, and the reason is we tend to make We want to make the church building as flexible as possible because even though you might have a master plan, it, I guarantee, will change as the minister needs change. So you want the building to be able to be changed and flexed around too. I'm not a big fan of tilt-up construction, for example, because once you've locked in the building, it's really, really, from an architecture or technology point, building structures point of view, hard to change. Can't cut holes in the wall and things like that. So designing for flexibility is a part of the architecture.
I love that whole idea of designing for flexibility. That's so good. And I think you're referencing something that I've read about called the third space, right? We
Yeah,
have the
absolutely.
first space is generally home, and then second space is work. But really, one of the big things that's being discussed right now is that third space. And we've
Mhm.
lost some of that within society. And I think it's so powerful when a church can plan to be that third space where
Yeah.
people want to be, where you create an environment where the community feels welcomed and they can come in. And so I've seen
Mhm.
churches be very creative about everything from
Yeah.
maybe having laundering that's available, or having places where you can have what do you like English as a where you teach English classes,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or places where you have some sort of support for childcare, like just inviting the community in so it feels
Yeah.
like a welcoming space, and really making a point to create your environment in that way. So this has gone so quickly, and I can't believe that we need to wrap up. But are there any final matters that you want to mention, especially as we highlight throughout the Church Lawn Leadership Summit? We're going to be talking about leadership transitions, succession, governance, and preparing churches for change. So these are, I think, all a part of the things in the way that the church has to think about its property and its long-term campus planning as well. So are there any final words that you'd like to share as we wrap up? And we certainly look forward to hearing more from you at the fireside chat on day 2 of the summit.
I look forward to that as well. And I guess the singular thought I would leave is just remember the church building is not the church. The people are the church. Building is just a tool for ministry. So we tend to hold on to our facility too dearly sometimes, and we need to be able to let it change to meet the ministry needs and let those priorities be in the right order.
So good. That's so powerful. Again, Ravi, thank you so much for being with us and for giving us a preview of what I know is going to be an incredibly valuable conversation at this year's Church Lawn Leadership Summit. I love that we're having this discussion because church property, as you said, isn't just about bricks and mortars, right? It's about ministry, stewardship, vision, leadership, right? Preparing our churches to serve their communities well for years to come. So if your church is considering a renovation or an expansion, or you're in a building fund right now, or even just trying to figure out what to do with the facility you already have, you definitely want to be a part of the fireside chat. Again, Ravi will be joining us on day 2 of the 19th annual Church Lawn Leadership Summit, where we'll have an honest and practical conversation about church property and the decisions that leaders need to be thinking about now, not to mention 5-10 years down the road. The summit is happening on September 17th and 18th under this year's theme. The time is now, building resilient churches for a shifting world. So if you haven't registered yet, make sure you secure your spot and bring your leadership team with you. You don't want to miss the conversation or the incredible lineup of speakers and sessions we have planned. Also, if you've enjoyed today's conversation and you want to stay updated on future interviews and resources for your church, make sure to subscribe to the Church Attorney YouTube channel. Again, that link is in the chat. Ravi, again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your wisdom and insights throughout the years, and we look forward to seeing you again at the summit.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.